what's happening in the protest will, because we saw the NYPD maybe do what they've been waiting to do for the last decade, maybe the last 5 years, since they feel like they haven't been able to do it. Now they're able to actually go and do their jobs as the boys in blue have always been able to do, but sadly for the last few years have been kept inability to do it. Now they're going to take an action.
And Mayor Adams had very strong language today about the outside agitators, even saying even if there are students, it doesn't necessarily mean the rot that comes from those outside agitators wasn't infecting these protests and encampments or whatever you want to call them on the campus. And he's very concerned about it radicalizing the young people of America. As a matter of fact, they had replaced an American flag on campus with a Palestinian flag. The police last night tore down the Palestinian flag and raised an American flag in its place. It almost called back the imagery of George W. Bush at Ground Zero after 9/11, where they raised the American flag amongst the rubble. It was a very patriotic feeling moment, but the police also did it without incident, really. Like there wasn't mass fighting. There wasn't mass, what they would then try to claim as police brutality. They were able to be very efficient, organized. They got to bring out what appeared to be a new truck that loaded people into the second floor of Hamilton Hall there on Columbia's campus. And really, they just did a great job of doing it in a organized, orderly manner without incident.
Do people bring up that this is hate speech? Sure, absolutely. I'd even say you could probably find clips of the Biden administration from Karan Jean-Pierre saying that they do not condone any kind of hate speech that would be going on towards Jewish students. The problem is their definition of hate speech gets a little fuzzy. We had that happen last year with the Ivy League students, or heads of the Ivy League schools were brought up, and they said, well, do you not think this is hate speech? Well, or targeting your Jewish students? Well, they're calling for the death to Jews, not death to that Jew. So it's a little broad. I mean, legitimately, these are the conversations that are happening.
The ability of the liberal elite in academia to play word gymnastics is astounding. The fact that even as these protests grew, and we knew where it would go, we were even given some of the protesters a little bit too much credit back then, saying they probably don't know what they mean when they say from the river to the sea. Maybe they don't know really about Hamas. They just found out about this crisis, and now it's their cause du jour. And maybe they don't know, but no, they knew. They knew all along. Now they are fully embracing Hamas. They are calling on the military wing of Hamas to strike Tel Aviv in some of their chants. They are saying things, putting new signs on university buildings saying Intifada Hall. They know what all this means.
Yeah.
They know this means violent, terroristic uprising against Jews. There's nothing about that you can even remotely start to wiggle out of. It's not hate speech.
It seems like some of these universities, they were caught in a weird spot where they felt like they couldn't shut this down earlier, where maybe they were scared. They didn't know what to do. And honestly, it seems like they went from scared to, how did this happen? Very quickly. They went from, oh, we'll let them set up some tents. This will go away in a day, in 2 days. And then all of a sudden, this is where it ends up with the NYPD having to essentially storm in, arrest hundreds of people, some students. Some of the universities have to wake up to also what's going on their own campuses.
Yeah. Look, I actually think they knew. I think they knew that some of this was their students, but that some of this was being funded, underwritten, organized, trained by outside forces that have been part of protest movements all across the country, bad actors who are truly trying to undermine our very republic. I think they saw that. I think the police forces knew that and were telling them. I saw the NYPD briefing this morning. Clearly, they were aware that this wasn't just a bunch of young kids who'd gotten together at their local club and decided, hey, let's go take over a building. And then they became petrified that the response, if something happened while the law enforcement people were rightfully taking back the property of the University of Columbia, that they would be held accountable for that. That's a mistake. That's the same mistake President Biden is making in Gaza today. Concerned that if the Israelis actually do the task that's needed to do to secure their nation, just like these presidents should have secured their campuses, these are deep parallels. And this is a national challenge that President Biden has to step up and say, we are going to stop terrorists, whether we find them on our college campuses or if the Israelis find them killing 1,000 of their people and still holding Americans hostage. We're going to support the people who are the good people, and we're going to crush evil wherever we find it.
NYPD did infer that they started noticing some things among the encampment, some tactics, some strategies, several things, and some people who they knew.
Yeah.
So
regulars.
They are regulars that have been doing, whether it started back with the BLM protest, Mayor Adams even made reference to that. Yeah. That some of these people are repeat offenders, if you will. It's
basically
just it's a new cause,
Antifa
new day.
without saying Antifa.
Right. Yeah.
Like, they're just people who show up all the time. We don't know what to call them. They wear masks. They have bats.
It really just is devastating to see what is taking place on American university campuses and what's taking place in the streets and how quickly it's spreading as well. It's not like this is slowing down. Fortunately, the NYPD were able to make a show of force last night in a way that can't be criticized as police brutality or some narrative from the left. But the unfortunate nature is that it is still spreading, and that's what concerns me, Jeff.
It is a cultural phenomenon. That didn't start on October 7th or the day after. It's been building for decades. This idea that the Jews are somehow specially privileged and oppressors, and it's part of progressive mentality, and it's completely taken over this culture so that the Jews are the bad guys no matter what they do. So if the Jews are raped, it's their own fault. The Jews are murdered and kidnapped, it's their own fault. And that's exactly what they're being taught in the university. And it's not just the students, it's the faculty, it's the administration. And so they've been fostering this for years.
You referenced that NYPD press conference this morning, and they did share a lot of intel. It seemed that they knew specific people that were there that were outside agitators. But it struck me that Mayor Adams, who he himself was former NYPD commissioner, that he seems to be one of the lone Democrat voices, other than some members of Congress, that are really speaking out about what he's seeing here. And he even said that I'm going to protect our city from those who are attempting to do what is happening globally. There's a movement to radicalize young people. Do you think he's right in that assessment of what he's seeing?
100%. And sadly, I say this as a sadly, it's pretty courageous for him to say that as a Democrat. Shouldn't be courageous to say something like to acknowledge what's really taking place on our campuses, that this is a national effort underwritten globally. These protests, I am confident, will spread to European campuses as well. We'll probably see it all across the world. For him to say that is good. He found his voice when he talked about putting the American flag back atop that flagpole. I think he found his voice. This shouldn't be partisan. This shouldn't be about politics. This should be about the fundamental right for people to exercise their freedoms. But when they cross the line, when they threaten other students, when colleges have to respond by canceling graduations or closing campuses, and they begin to destroy property and deny the other students their right to get an education, that's no longer about free speech. This is about the rule of law. And for him to step up today and say he supports that is great. I can't wait to see Senator Schumer, President Biden echo those same remarks. I suspect we likely won't.
These protests, some of them actually getting handled now. And look, we're all for peaceful protests. We believe in the rule of law in that sense. We really want you out there, peacefully protesting. But when it turns to chaos and violence, especially calling for death to a certain group of people, any group of people, we'll stand up against it. That is not the way it should be.